and welcome to Kubby TV. This is going to be a very special treat. We have as our guest for the next 3 episodes none other than Dr. David Allen, former heart surgeon, a man who has saved literally thousands of lives, and a man who has come to see the value, the scientific breakthroughs of cannabis medicine. And he's now focused entirely on creating an awareness of this revolution in science. And it really is a revolution. I mean, even people within our movement don't really understand what we're about to hear in just a few minutes from Dr. Allen. Dr. Allen is not only a medical authority, he is, in my opinion, a world authority on cannabinoids and cannabinoid physiology. And what you're going to learn in just a minute from Dr. David Allen is the latest cutting-edge scientific and medical knowledge that we've accumulated just within these past few years about this revolutionary new look at the body being mediated by this cannabis system, this endocannabinoid system that goes back hundreds of millions of years in our evolution to the first mollusk. And we're just discovering this. We have still a long way to understand what's going on, but already we have literally thousands of papers about the endocannabinoid system and the receptors that are in virtually every part of our body. We have receptors in the gut, we have it in the brain, we have it in the skin, we have it in organs, and this isn't an accident. There is a fundamental physiological, homeostatic master control system, and a system that protects us from what we're coming to understand as oxidative stress. And Dr. Allen is going to address these 2 issues for us. And you'll see that the scientific revolution, the breakthrough, the biggest of these breakthroughs is the recognition, the research, and the understanding of the all-pervasive impact of the human and throughout the whole entire animal species endocannabinoid system. So I'm going to have Dr. Allen introduce himself, and then he's going to start in with a discussion about how medical schools, which should be on the forefront of research and developing a new understanding of how the human body works, is completely ignorant and avoiding this, the teaching, the mention of this huge revolution that is taking place in medicine. So without any further delay, let's hear from Dr. David Allen.
My name is Dr. David Allen. I'm a retired cardiovascular and thoracic surgeon and member of the ICRS, the International Cannabinoid Research Society. I consider myself a cannabis research scientist and want to talk about a recent paper that I published, and it's termed Ignorance is Not Bliss. And what we did was we called all of the medical schools in the United States. We called 157 medical schools and talked to the directors of the curriculum if they had a department of endocannabinoid science, if they had a director, or if they even taught this subject, the endocannabinoid science, as a organized course, or if they mention it in any ancillary courses like pathophysiology, neuroanatomy, or pharmacology. And the answer was that only 13% of the medical schools in the United States that we surveyed actually even mentioned this in any ancillary courses, and there's no organized courses being taught in anywhere in the United States of America to the medical students. So this means that the majority of the doctors that graduate this year will have no knowledge of the ECS or its significance. And the ECS is a new science that we kind of discovered about 30 years ago, and it involves the chemicals that your body makes, these cannabinoids, that bind onto tissue receptors on every cell that you own. And so these cannabinoids bind onto the cannabinoid receptors, and they cause physiologic effect. And we're discovering now that the importance of this is that this is a master control system for virtually all physiology. So for physicians not to have a working knowledge of the ECS seems a bit backwards. And so we sent letters with copies of this article to all the deans of the medical schools that we contacted, and suggested that they investigate starting a department of endocannabinoid science with a director, and directed course studies in this science.
Now that we've covered some of the basics, let's turn to a discussion of oxidative stress. Now, this is a term that I first heard from Dr. Allen, and yet it is an accepted basic physiological principle that scientists recognize and accept. And the breakthrough is the understanding that it's the endocannabinoid system that protects us from oxidative stress. And you know, I look at people that use cannabis, and I look at people that don't use cannabis, and I see a difference. To me, and to my friends and to others, because even Dr. Allen has noticed it, the people that regularly use cannabis look younger. And there's a scientific basis for this, because the oxidative stress that we see and think of as aging is slowed down by cannabis. And as you'll hear, even Dr. Allen is beginning to look at cannabis as literally the fountain of youth. So let's get back to Dr. Allen.
It's a real complex science, and it involves two major functions that these cannabinoids that your body produces actually do. So the first thing that these endocannabinoids do is they scavenge oxygen-free radicals. And this is extremely important to the body, because when your body makes these oxygen-free radicals, they actually attack these cells and cause damage to the cell wall and to your cellular organelles. And so the reality is these oxygen-free radicals actually attack your cell wall, and they age you. And your body's defense mechanism in a large part is due to this endocannabinoid system, which makes these endocannabinoids, they're endogenous, and they scavenge these oxygen-free radicals. So that's one of the major mechanisms that cannabis works by, because it stops oxygen-free radicals. The other mechanism is, as I alluded to, is these chemicals that your body makes, these endocannabinoids, bind on to cannabinoid receptors, and they cause physiologic effect. And we've known about tissue cell receptors for a long time. Insulin has its own insulin receptors, and insulin binds to the insulin receptors in a lock and key mechanism. No other chemical will bind on to the insulin receptors. And so you have insulin receptors, testosterone receptors, estrogen receptors, opiate receptors, and you have cannabinoid receptors. And we're finding out that the major importance of all this, we recently found out that the numbers of these cannabinoid receptors in your brain outnumber all the other receptors combined. So we're finding out the significance of the effects of these cannabinoids and their cannabinoid receptors. There are several types of cannabinoid receptors. There may be as many as 5 different types. 2 are well known, CB1 and CB2. CB1 receptors are mostly localized in brain tissue, neurons, and CB2 are for the most part located in the body. So they're located in lymphatic organs, the spleen, the liver, your intestines, lungs, and many of your organs. And they have different functions depending on how they're stimulated. And different chemicals can stimulate these or also block these receptors. And this receptor science is really what kind of changed scientific thought in America about the endocannabinoid system. We really didn't believe it existed. And they found out about these receptors, and they actually made chemicals that would bind to these receptors and block the receptor action. And they developed a chemical that bound onto CB1 receptors, and it blocked the receptor, so no other cannabinoids could be stimulated to the receptor. And they called it rimonabant. And the reason they developed this chemical was because they knew that if you use cannabis, it made you hungry. So if they thought if they blocked that receptor, it would make people not hungry and be a diet drug. And indeed, once they developed this new drug called rimonabant, it did the opposite of what cannabis does. So they released it and tried it on a bunch of people in Europe, and they started having trouble almost immediately. And it did the opposite thing of what marijuana does. Instead, marijuana makes you happy. Well, this drug stopped that and made people angry and aggressive. People became suicidal and homicidal because of this drug. And it did make them where they wouldn't want to eat. So it was a pretty good diet drug in that effect, but it had so much other side effects that they actually had to take it off the market. Well, when they did that, the scientists in America realized that if you stimulate these receptors, good things happen, and if you block these receptors, bad things happen. So it really brought to the scientific mind the knowledge that this is not just some imagination. You can't really see these receptors even with a microscope. They're submicroscopic, and people don't believe what they can't see and touch and feel. And so they didn't understand really all of the significance of tissue receptor science. but they did understand that once you block these receptors, that bad things happen. And so that made the United States scientists understand that this was truly a scientific discovery, and we're in the infancy of this science. And in the future, if your physician does not know about the ECS, if he doesn't have a working knowledge of the ECS and the ability to manipulate it for physiologic effect, he will not be able to call himself a physician. So this will be a requirement in the near future of all physicians to learn and become expert in this science.
Well, now that we've covered some of the basics, let's turn to a discussion of oxidative stress. Now, this is a term that I first heard from Dr. Allen, and yet it is an accepted basic physiological principle that scientists recognize and accept. And the breakthrough is the understanding that it's the endocannabinoid system that protects us from oxidative stress. And you know, I look at people that use cannabis, and I look at people that don't use cannabis, and I see a difference. To me, and to my friends and to others, because even Dr. Allen has noticed it, the people that regularly use cannabis look younger. And there's a scientific basis for this, because the oxidative stress that we see and think of as aging is slowed down by cannabis. And as you'll hear, even Dr. Allen is beginning to look at cannabis as literally the fountain of youth. So let's get back to Dr. Allen.
When you burn anything, you create heat and you also create exhaust. So when the body burns food, it takes carbohydrates and fats and sugars, and it breaks them down in an enzymatic process. And really, it's a burning process. And so when you burn your food, you make calories and you form adenosine triphosphate. That's the energy molecule of the cell. And when you, in the process of making this energy, this caloric output, you also make exhaust. And what you do is you, in the enzymatic process of degrading the sugar, you cleave oxygen molecules, and that's O2, and you break them apart and they become two oxygen-free radicals. And what that means is they have an unpaired electron. And when they're together with this O2, they're paired. When you break them apart, they're unpaired. And they hate that, and they look for an electron donor. And your cellular organelles and your cell wall, your cell membrane, are the electron donors. And so these oxygen-free radicals attack your cell wall, attack your mitochondria, and there's a buffering process that your body has that naturally buffers you from this oxidative stress. And so the truth is, the more food you eat, the more oxygen-free radicals you produce. And if you don't have a buffering system to buffer these oxygen-free radicals, your food actually oxidizes you. And so really the ECS is a fountain of youth in this aspect. And if you didn't have a proper functioning endocannabinoid system, you would probably be fully oxidized by your food by the time you were 2 years old. And so the ECS is the fountain of youth.
Okay, well, that about wraps it up for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your comments. I read all the comments. And tomorrow we're going to be joined again by Dr. Allen. And Dr. Allen is going to share with us his own personal experiences with the war on drug. And he's got some very, very powerful observations, as well as a very compelling story. So please join us tomorrow right here, Pot TV, Cannabis Culture, online, Kubby TV. Hey, see you tomorrow. That means you.
It's the proximity of what I hope to be. The weight so heavy where I stand. The indecision builds within my twisted sense of self.